fucking down the internet.
All right, everybody. It is noon in the East. It is 9 a.m. in the West. It is Friday, January 21st, and that means it is Lunch with Lincoln.
Woo.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I am Reed Galen. I'm your host for today, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and I am very excited to have on the Lincoln airwaves Fred Wellman. Fred is a longtime friend, senior advisor, and otherwise major domo of the Lincoln Project. Fred, welcome back.
Good to be back, Reed. Good to see
So,
you.
guys, if I read every moment of Fred's resume, it would take the next 29 minutes. But needless to say, Fred is a West Point grad, decorated veteran, helicopter pilot. I don't know, 2 tours in Iraq. Fred, is that right?
3 in Iraq, Desert Storm 2, so 4.
Yeah. So three tours overseas, guys. Veterans advocate, PR pro, and now the co-founder of the Beer Hall Project. Just launched the week of January 6th. So, Fred, I want to hear about that. But, guys, for just a little bit of historical context, in 99 years ago, Fred, a guy named Adolf Hitler stood in the Burger Bräukeller beer hall in Munich, Germany, and declared that the Weimar Republic was dead, marched down to the city hall, basically, with a guy named Erich Ludendorff, who had been a major general who'd basically been the military dictator of Germany for the last couple of years of World War I. Shots rang out. Many people were killed. Hitler ran for his life, was subsequently convicted, spent some time in prison, wrote Mein Kampf, and 10 years later, he's Chancellor of Germany, and the rest of us have all been affected one way or another. So, that's the backstory, but tell us where you came from with the Beer Hall Project, what it is you're trying to do, and how folks can get involved.
I appreciate it. And that historical context is everything. We purposely called it the Beer Hall Project for that, to call back the historic march to autocracy. You talk about Mussolini, you talk about any of these movements where they've had a violent attempt and then went a different direction. And for us, it's not just the violence of January 6th. And you know me, Reed, I've been obsessed with January 6th since it happened. Thank God my son was with me that day, having me delete tweets that I sent in anger. and so since then, what has horrified me more, though, is not just the violence, but the way that the history's been rewritten, it's been erased. The coup continues, which is exactly what happened with Hitler. When Hitler went to jail, he figured out quickly that a violent overthrow of the government wasn't the path for them, and he would manipulate the weak powers, the weak democratic institutions. He would use misinformation. He would use his brown shirt thugs to cause chaos in the streets, and eventually take power peacefully using the democracy. That's the lesson of that movement. And look, here we are a year later. Some 5, I think it's even more now. Last time I checked, it was like 500 plus Republican laws have been bills have been tried to introduced. 39 have been passed in multiple states. Roll back our voting rights. You see terrifying things in states where they're trying to take over election boards, they're trying to take over school boards, and manipulate the levers of power and to take power. And the thing to remember about the Beer Hall push is that the then National Socialist Party, NSP, was relatively small, right? They weren't a major party for 10 years. We have one of our 2 major parties as under the thrall of this person in an all-track movement. So our timeline is not 10 years, right? Our timeline is the next election and then 2024. So with that urgency in mind, I met a colleague, Cyrus Schick, who's a great guy. When I moved here, I moved to St. Louis recently, and worked on some campaigns locally. And he is equally obsessed. And together we came together to had this idea of a new PAC, and it would fit with Lincoln Project, fit with Midas, fit with Operation 147. The goal being to really go in, figure out, there's like 27% of Americans are disconnected, right? They're not involved in politics now. How do we reach them? How do we make sure that these people who worry about the economy, how do we get in front of them that we also have a danger of our democracy? That I love how Ruth Van Guy always likes to point out that autocracy is not good for the economy either. Constantly, and the old yarn that Hitler made the trains run on time is actually not true. The economy was a disaster, and so how do we reach those people? So we're going to do the research, we're going to do the polling, we're going to try and invest in that, focus groups, while at the same time providing educational resources on the historic analogies we face, the moment we face, doing our own investigations. We've had some great journalists come to us who want to work with us and kind of investigate things and put out, thoughtful pieces that make people realize what we face. So I'm excited about it. It's different. I didn't, as you know, as you've launched the union, which I hope we'll talk about, it's going to take a coalition. It was the biggest lesson I learned from our time during the general election in 2020 with Lincoln Project, right? We don't do it alone. So we're hoping that BHP will be part of that coalition.
So, I mean, Fred, just to think back on the historical context of your group, was that, much like, 99 years ago, or
Yep.
Can you believe this? This summer, it'll be 7 years since Trump announced his
Yep.
candidacy, right? I can't believe that. Rick and I were talking about that yesterday, and the rest of our hair fell out, right?
Yeah. I was brown then.
Right, exactly. But no one took him 99, nearly 100 years ago, no one took him seriously either, right?
Correct.
Almost 7 years ago, everybody thought Trump was the clown he'd always been.
Yep.
No one understood what we were facing. And, you mentioned Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I just finished her book, Strongmen, which, gang, is absolutely great. It's about 260 pages. It's got a new epilogue for her new edition here. It's very readable. And you realize, Fred, that the stuff that she's talking about and the stuff that's sort of the impetus for your group, this is not ancient history. This is not the Roman Empire. This is not the Greeks. This is not even like, Henry VIII. Like, all this stuff happened in the last 100 years. And somehow, like, we have this collective memory wipe where, like, oh, it can't happen here. You can't invoke the stuff that happened in Italy or Germany or Spain or Chile because, it's not the same thing. But the truth is that the biggest issue we face, maybe, Fred, is the lack of imagination.
Right. It's funny. And we knew I had a conversation with Paul Hoden's former congressman on his radio show the other day. And he opened up, because, the number one rule in politics is you can't bring up the Nazis, right? He goes, and you guys went, and we made it. It was a tough decision. We floated it around to a number of people saying, are we going to eat this? And I think in a lot of ways, that's been used. Controlling that language has been part of the way to erase January 6th and control the discussion around what we do see as an autocratic movement in the United States. That, you can't say Nazis. And it's like, no, that there is a historic parallel between, Nazism, between the Mussolini and his black shirts, which is, by the way, is whom Hitler was trying to modify. Mussolini had his march to Rome just a month and a half for the Beer Hall Putsch in November 1923. Hitler's failed. But they try to shut down the conversation. We saw it immediately. We had some hit pieces written about us within 4 days, and I'm like, well, I guess we must have the target because they're trying to come after us.
Right.
And right. It's like
I know you are not a fixed wing aviator, but yes, the expression if you're taking flak, you're over the target.
You're over the target. So I'm comfortable with that. And again, we have to have this conversation. And the American exceptional idea that it can't happen here is gonna, it's like I say a lot, and you've heard me say in a previous discussion we've had, is we're gonna norms and traditions ourselves out of a democracy.
Right.
And so we have to have some very hard conversations. And those hard conversations say, look, here's the historic context of what we're facing. Here are the beats. The saying, like we say a lot, is history may not repeat itself, but it has a familiar rhythm. And you can hear the historical beats, and we see them today, and some of the people involved in, unfortunately, our former party, the GOP. And so I think we deny that at our peril. We try to control our language around that conversation at our peril. So we made a very conscious decision to just go right at it and write in our title, write in our story. Look, and look, we're not saying, nowhere am I saying that the GOP are Nazis. No. What I'm saying is that autocratic movements have a certain beat to them, and that's what Ruth talks about in her book so well. I've got it on my nightstand. It's so good. You see the historic pattern, and if we ignore those patterns at our peril with this American exceptional idea that, believe it or not, it can't here. It can happen here because we're just not prepared for it. We just aren't.
Well, and I mean, I think the other part too is that there are different pieces of power centers that all have to come together on this, right? And when I worked in Republican politics, right, there was always this sort of conservative movement. And remember, when I was a kid, there were conservatives and there were Republicans, and the Venn diagram was pretty close, but they weren't necessarily the same thing.
No,
right? No. And I was never a conservative; I was a Republican. But that conservative movement, whether or not it's 40 years of the Federalist Society or the Heritage Foundation or the Hitler Jugend at the Claremont Institute, right? Like these people have been around a long time espousing these things.
Yep.
It seems like it was with Trump bringing all those innate strongman things to the table, which, again, going back to Ruth's book, a lot of these people, like it's inborn in them, right? Like it wasn't like they learned how to do it at the foot of somebody else. They sort of, whatever their upbringing, whatever their psychological defects were, sort of brought them to this place. And so now you see this where, you have Georgia, to your point. It's not just about the front end of how people vote, who can vote, the method and processes by you vote, but now, as you mentioned with like the Georgia Elections Board, who's going to count the vote, right? What are the rules they're going to abide by? And here's the thing, and I had somebody on last week who said this, it's undemocratic, but in the current context, it's not illegal.
Right. And that's the thing. Trump's basic question his entire life is, can I do it?
Right.
And it's illegal. Yeah, but can I do it? and I don't think we were ever prepared for a person to take political power who had no moral compass and surround himself with people even lower moral compasses. And so we faced that. Like you said, what you just said is so interesting. You heard the other day where Trump echoed Stalin. Stalin was famous saying for Stalin, right? Stalin says, it doesn't matter what the vote, it matters who counts the vote. And then you have, I saw one the other day, we have DeSantis down in Florida, essentially kind of abbreviating Mussolini, which says, I know what every Italian student is reading at any minute of the day. These are historic beats. It could have been better timing for the Beer Hall Project to see these sort of them actually doing call outs of historic autocrats and the things they're doing, controlling education, controlling the vote, counting the vote. I mean, if you can't see the beats, you're not paying attention. You just can't. You're not paying attention.
In Florida, DeSantis just announced his second sort of quasi-governmental police force. The first one was the Florida Patrol or whatever. And this one is an elections police force. David Perdue, who lost the Senate race in a year, about a year ago, was running for governor against the sitting governor in Georgia, Brian Kemp, said if elected, he will do the same thing. I mean, I guess my question to you is someone who is a student of history, has served in the military, and is now doing this. Why aren't people going, you're going to do what? Like, where? I guess to echo the recently departed Bob Dole, like, where's the outrage?
Right, and that's what we're trying to find out. I mean, that's literally is the defining question of my organization is why aren't they? What are we doing wrong that we can't reach people to not necessarily, like you said, stoke outrage, but at least bring awareness that we have a situation that is in danger of our democracy. And when the democracy is endangered, we're all endangered. Again, you won't have a good economy. You won't have the freedom of maneuver you do now, the freedom to live your life. It's a story I tell often. I told in an interview yesterday, right? So I'm sitting in Iraq, 2003. I was doing a lot of civil affairs around the Air Base Q West in northern Iraq. And I worked with a partner named Dr. Muhammad, who was a local sheikh. And after one of our, we call them death marches, we visit all these villages. We were sitting there eating sheep and drinking tea. And Muhammad and I got talking, and he says, you have to understand something, Major One, when I was a major at the time. He said, freedom as you define it in America and freedom as we define it in Iraq are very different. In America, freedom means you can travel where you will. You can vote for whom you want. You can work and be free to live your lives. In Iraq today, in 2003, freedom means you stole my sheep. Boom! I get my gun. I kill you. And I remember thinking to myself, goodness gracious, that. Thank God I live in America. And but now look where we are here in 2022. We see this. We see the death threats. We see people standing up at GOP and conservative conference saying, "Hey, when do we get to use our Second Amendment rights? When do we start to get hanging or get to start hanging these people?" It's there. We're there. We're at the precipice. And I think if we ignore that precipice and ignore what we face, it's just a single beat, and over the line we go. And I say often lately too, especially since I started this, is that I'd rather be 15 years from now regretting being overreacting than sitting in a jail cell wishing I'd done more.
Well, listen, we might too. You and I might end up right on both points and still end up where we
used to joke about sizing up who was going to bunk together in prison if we lost the election. Those are running jokes.
These are the fun conversations you get to have at your home.
Yeah.
Like, well, what
look, I'm not taking this
happens in 2024? Right? Dodgy deal. So let me ask you this. Is your experience, long experience, again, going back to West Point, right? How do you see, let me back up, is that what we saw in 2020 during Trump's reelection was the deployment of the forces of the state. This was mostly law enforcement, whether or not it was Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, but Trump very much wanted to deploy the military.
Yes.
And General Milley, the head of the Joint Chiefs, basically said, you're not going to do that. And Trump backed off. Fast forward to a year ago, January 6th, a lot of the people arrested for storming the Capitol, veterans, either active, either serving officers in the, in a police force or retired. What does that say about the sort of organs of state violence, for lack of a better way to put it? Because, it doesn't take a lot of guys with guns to scare the rest of us into staying inside our houses.
Well, that's it. And to me, and we talked about this during the general election. That was frankly why you guys gave me the remit to focus on veterans and military families, was the idea that, one of the keys to power and democracy is like state control of violence. The idea of an apolitical military with civilian control of the military is the founding principle of this nation in many ways. Our founding fathers and our founding citizens feared a standing army. Even George Washington didn't want a standing army. Nobody wanted a standing army because it had been used as tools of autocrats in history up until those days. And so we cherish that position. It was something. When I was actually in the military, somebody reminded me this the other day that when I started serving in the military early, I joined in, and remember, I went to West Point in 1983. I graduated in 87 under Ronald Reagan. There was a long period there, Reed, where it was tradition among the officer corps not to vote, where most officers didn't even vote. We felt, I didn't vote for many years in those early days because I felt I did. It's funny. I used to vote for local elections in Missouri. In my hometown, but I did not vote for president because it just felt unprofessional to vote for my commander in chief. So we've gone so far from that with, and that's been growing for a while to the point where we see, at first it was the endorsements. Now we see this. I don't know. You recently saw this group of ancient. Remember, I think we did an analysis. Like the average age was like 78 years old. But these generals who endorsed Trump and now have been fighting Biden, very openly. But the fear really is, like you said, is, well, how far does it go? Veterans and actual active duty military personnel are far outweigh in amongst the January 6th perpetrators than they do in society. 10-12% of those who are under indictment right now were service, when we only represent less than 7% of the general population. So that tells us something, that there's been a movement to undermine the military, to use the military as a place to train militias. Many of these militia members, 5 of the Oath Keepers that were indicted 2 weeks ago were all military veterans, to include Stuart Rhodes, who's the founder. Let's not ever forget that the Oklahoma City bomber, was a military veteran. So we have an issue we have to address. It is truly an elephant in the room. I'm glad that DOD is, but I think there in many ways we're, So what does it mean to our society? It should be something we fear. I hate to say it. Politicization of the military, active politics, active extremism participation is something that we should fear. And knowing we have a president who is willing to push that to its limit, to at least, to hold on to power is scary. I say something often, Reed, is what if BLM had shown up that day? What if Antifa had shown up that day and there had been fights in the streets on January 6th and they got, because that's what they wanted. They wanted them to show up and they wanted fights. Would the National Guard have deployed on which side in that case? Right? It's kind of a scary thought, right? If you look at the Reichstag fire, the Bolsheviks burned the Reichstag just a month after Hitler became chancellor. I think of things like that and the permutations that could have occurred on January 6th, and it really makes my blood run cold. It really does.
But I think, using the Reichstag fire again, 1933, as the flames were lapping at their version of basically Congress back then. Hitler was basically like, history starts with this fire, right?
Yep.
They caught one guy, he was, not
Danish Bolshevik,
clearly not bright enough to come up with this by himself.
Right.
But what we see in, whether or not it's Bannon, Dan Bongino, Tucker Carlson, all these people, is like the whole idea of it was a false flag, right? It was Antifa. It was the FBI. It was these deep state actors who never liked Donald Trump, right? Who were always against the movement, when we know that that's bullshit, but it doesn't matter. And so that's the other part too I want to take is, and we've seen this a lot on Fox, right? Tucker Carlson called General Milley a loser. It was either earlier this week or late last week. Laura Ingraham had some same goofball she has on her show every night or every week. That, you know, it was announced that General Milley contracted COVID, and she clapped. She literally clapped on the air. Like that, it just like, and now we have Carlson like towing the Russian line. I mean, what? I don't want to call it American conservatism anymore. It's American radicalism. Almost.
It is. It is. It is.
When you have you know, you have people cheering the sickness of the chief military officer or chief military advisor to the president, and you have our long-standing, adversary, who's same people, different names, different titles, but same people, same guy, same type of guy, and now they're cheering him on.
Same goal.
Like, I mean, what is someone who is both, has a historical background, but also a military background and political. So take all those things together. Like, what does that say to you?
It says that we have a party that has become a nationalist extremist party. There's just no way around it. And again, I keep going back to historic analysis and analogy that I'm using, as misinformation and disinformation was a key part of Mussolini and Hitler's rise. Convincing people that there was this enemy that was undermining everything, convincing them they were stabbed in the back, that they would have won if they hadn't been stabbed in the back.
Was the Jews,
all the time. Right. So what we see, and like you just said, we see in our own country the exact same thing, where we used to joke they support the troops till they don't. And that's exactly the case. So if you're doing that, I'll be honest, I have a classmate from West Point who's a former FBI official that has made part of his gig now is calling the FBI woke, and smearing his old colleagues, the FBI, because it took them like 36 hours or 24 hours to call the attack in Texas terrorism. That just shows how they've gone woke. It's amazing to see people who are part of these institutions and just allegedly used to support these institutions attacking them. And then you have to ask, well, why? What's the goal? And the goal, I believe, like you said, the goal is to undermine these institutions, to set the tone so that when they decide to finally do the final act, whichever may be, to take power, they can point to these things and say, look, we told you, these are the bad guys, is the enemy. It's terrifying. Seeing Tucker Carlson literally parroting Russian talking points on national TV and the most popular news show on television should terrify everybody. And I'll tell you, and the story I tell, and I think you and I talked about, I'm sure we talked about in Park City, is my final straw for me and the Republicans was when Trump smeared, John McCain. I like people that weren't captured. And it wasn't Trump saying that. He's a monster. We get that. It was how many of my peers, how many of my fellow veterans and other politicians in the Republican Party just went, well, he was kind of a bad guy. It's like, whoa, hold on. Something's changed here. That to me was such a seismic change, where in any time in my entire lifetime of service to the nation in uniform and out, the idea that a political figure would say, I don't like POWs, they're not heroes. That's not, I don't care if you're against the military, but to say someone who spent 5 years in a Vietnamese prison or whatever is not a hero for that. And then just everybody was, oh, okay. I think that was truly for me that seismic shift where I was like, I have no home here anymore. Right. And even I'll be very candid. One of the reasons I left Veterans Advocacy, I know it sounds crazy, and I don't think I've ever said this publicly. One of the reasons I left Veterans Advocacy was so many of my peers in that world were like, nah, it's cool. And I said, we're not on the same page anymore, where certain things that were bedrocks of our community are so malleable. If you remember, just the most shocking thing of that was that year, 2015, the Rolling Thunder motorcycle rally in DC, which was founded to honor POW and MIAs. And remember, Vietnam, POWs and MIAs.
Generally Memorial Day every year.
Memorial Day every year.
Right.
That year, they ended it with a rally for Donald Trump at the Lincoln Memorial.
Right.
After he'd said, I don't like people who were captured. And to me, I was like, my God, where are we? Where are we as a country that an organization who's dedicated to the idea of honoring POWs and MIA is honoring a guy who said they were cowards? Well, we have to ask.
That day that he made that remark, I was sitting in San Francisco at a sort of political tech conference I'd helped organize, and we had a lot of national political reporters in town because I think Rand Paul was going to speak. Mm-hmm. Some other potential presidential candidates were going to speak. We saw him make that remark, and we all thought, okay, well, that's it. This was a fun 10-week experiment, right?
Yep.
And it wasn't, right? Like, we're all like, you can't say. First of all, it's John McCain, right?
Yeah.
In
his own party.
Yeah, you can't say that about somebody who spent 5 years in a tiger cage and
Right.
had his arms and legs ripped apart,
And torture.
1,000 times. He was tortured. But to your point, and this is something that Mary Trump, his niece, taught me, almost 2 years ago, which is, if you read her book, what does she say? He always, from the moment he was in kindergarten on, he went in, he did the craziest ass thing he could think of, and what happened? People stood there with their mouths agape, staring because they couldn't believe anybody would do it. Did they stop him? No. They just stood and stared. And I think, Fred, we got a lot of people stopping and staring right now.
Right. And I think then, and what's our job, I think, for pro-democracy organizations like ours is we got to wake them up. We got to say, look, you got to stop staring. You got to act, because by the time you wake up and act, either locally, and again, it could be your local area, but my God, I live here in St. Louis now. School board meetings have descended into chaos. The attorney general is running for Senate, is suing school board. He's not prosecuting crimes. Eric Schmidt's spending all of his time suing local school boards over mask mandates, or he tried to sue China. I mean, it's insanity, but it starts local.
To the BS amicus brief, trying to get the Pennsylvania electors overturned. And Fred, this is the point. He is the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Missouri.
Of the state. Yep. Yeah.
And this another guy running for Senate is a disgraced sort of Navy SEAL who the community can't stand, who tied up his girlfriend in the basement, took pictures of her, threatened to expose her, and then had to leave office, right? Those are the people running for Senate in Missouri as Republicans.
And the guy waved guns at peaceful protesters. Let's not forget Mr. McCloskey. Yeah, it's great. And then Billy Long, just yesterday, Congressman Long said that the election was fake and that his number one goal is to prove that Trump was elected. This is the Missouri GOP today. Yeah, I'm living here, just kind of shaking my head. It's been high entertainment coming back to my hometown and seeing what's become of it. It's fun to be here, to be a part of it. It's kind of fun to call Josh Hawley my constituent of his now, so I could have special fun with that. But we have to. There's we made Josh Hawley the logo. If you look at the logo, the link of the Beer Hall project, people have kind of been aghast because we've created a shadow of Josh Hawley's famous salute on January 6th, because that he wanted to be the symbol of that. He did that on purpose. The route to the Senate. He took that route on purpose to cheer those guys on. And he wanted to be the symbol. So we said, you want to be the symbol, Josh? Congratulations, you're the symbol. And we're going to hang that around his neck until his election, and remind him that he decided to become a symbol. He decided to be the first senator to protest electoral college results. And we're going to hold these people accountable and not let them forget what they did.
Right. No, and look, I think that's right. I mean, and going back to the beginning of why you named it the Beer Hall Project, had Adolf Hitler been held to account, as he should have been,
yes,
on that day, in the subsequent days, in the subsequent weeks, months, and years, you and I aren't sitting here having this conversation. The world looks like a very different place. I don't know what it looks like, right? But it doesn't look like this.
Millions wouldn't have died unnecessarily. I mean, the Bavarian state court tried him because the thing everybody forgets is the state secretary of Bavaria actually supported the idea of a coup against the Weimar Republic. He just wanted to be in charge. He didn't like Hitler being in charge. So they gave him this kangaroo court, put him in literally a suite in his prison cell where he actually had guests and wrote his biography and honed the talking points from the Nazi Party. We can't let that happen. We can't leave folks off there. I cheer the January 6th committee. I'm fortunate to know Denver Riggleman, who's a professional staffer for them now, and I believe they're holding them accountable. But I'm going to keep pushing them too. It's funny, I get beat up a lot because I'm also hard on them. But look, it's funny. I get, and you'll appreciate this more than anybody. I get a lot of pushback from Democrats saying, hey, Fred, you shouldn't be so tough on the Dems. It's why don't you just blame the Republicans where the blame is? And I said, I agree. But again, historically, when Hitler took over Europe and created the genocide and created the Holocaust and all the horrible things, the only way it ended was because we put together a coalition and we fought back. And we made some mistakes along the way, but we also, in the end, succeeded in fighting back. So I'm going to be very hard on the coalition to fight back, because we have to fight back. It's not enough to sit back and lament. It's not enough to say, well, it's all the Republicans' fault. That ship sailed. It's time to fight. And whatever that means, maybe it's just, like I said, it's a coalition of groups like us who have different purposes, but can work towards the same goal, which is stopping the march of autocracy in the United States before it's too late.
Well, and that's right. And, as we go on, I want to just say, first, Fred, thank you for joining me today. And again, it's beerhallproject.com. You can find them on Twitter at Beer Hall Project. You can find Fred at FP Wellman. And guys, just I want to take an extra minute here. So, I really want to echo what Fred says, which is in 2020, an ad hoc coalition came together to help elect Joe Biden president, right? Coalitions are very difficult. They work in very unique ways. And in electoral politics in this country especially, they don't hold together from one election to the next. What Fred is doing, what we are doing, is trying to create that coalition that will help us hold the line in 2022 and ensure that whether it's Joe Biden or whoever the pro-democracy candidate is on the ballot in 2024 takes the White House, right? Please go to jointheunion.us. It is our new initiative at the Lincoln Project. A lot of folks ask, how can I get involved? How can I do something other than write a check or hit like on Facebook or retweet something? Jointheunion.us, gang. This is the way that groups from across the country, states, districts, counties, localities, all of us can come together. We don't have to wait for permission. We don't have to wait for somebody else to tell us what to do. Fred, I don't know whether or not it was George Patton or who it was. It says, lead me, follow me, or get out of the way, right? Like we're not ones for waiting around, and I don't think you are either. And so everybody, this is the thing. I know Fred believes this, and I know we at the Lincoln Project believe this. We will work with anyone who is committed to the pro-democracy cause in this country, right? We do not have the time for petty squabbles. We do not have the time for the backbiting and all the BS that you see in the media and in Washington, D.C., because those folks often do not understand the fight we're in. They want to believe that somehow this fever will break, that it won't be that bad, and all of a sudden everything will go back to normal. Guys, the new normal is up to us to create. It is up to us to create. Jointheunion.us. Join up today. Lots of options how you can help specifically with your area of expertise in your state, in your area. Before we go, I want to again say thanks to Fred. We're going to leave you with an ad we put up. Fred, best of luck. I hope you'll come back and give us an update on the Beer Hall Project. B, let's go ahead and run that ad, and everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Thanks. The application for stay of mandate and injunction pending review presented to the Chief Justice and by him referred to the court is denied.
Overwhelming for the Supreme Court. It looks like about an 8-1.
All three of the judges appointed to the court by Donald Trump joined in crushing the Trump cover-up dream today.
We talk a lot about things being divided, but this is the Supreme Court saying no to Donald Trump. You are not a king. You are not still president.
The Trump dream of a total cover-up has died.
Everyone, have a great weekend. Be safe out there. Jointheunion.us. Fred, we'll see you soon. BeerHallProject.com. Everybody, thanks for all your help. Thanks for tuning in.
See you later. Bye-bye.